I thought this is a great example of a typical board meeting that Jesus is having with his apostles. Let's get away, the 12 apostles, and let's have a retreat. Let's have a board meeting on the hillside. And Jesus begins to share. He sees the people. We actually know from Mark and Luke that he's teaching the people. They've been with him a long time. And Jesus goes, you know what? I sense that we should do a ministry. I think we should do a ministry of feeding the hungry. Let's feed all these people. It would be too tough to send them home, and let's give them some food. So he brings this up in the board meeting. Now, there are different responses to this. So I first want to look at the board members. And believe me, these three type of board members, I've been all three, sometimes in the same board meeting. So there are some board members who miss the opportunity to see potential ministry. They have little or no faith. So back in Mark chapter 6. So Jesus, he sees the hungry people. I think we should try to feed them. And starting in verse 35 of Mark 6, by the time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and go to McDonald's and buy themselves something to eat. I noticed they got to go to some restaurant or something because he says they got to go buy it. By the way, I saw on the news that on 228, down by Aldi's, they're going to build a McDonald's there. How many are happy? You know, it's amazing that only 3 of you raised your hand, because studies show that we all eat at McDonald's like every month. That's why they make them. That's why there's 5 billion. It used to be, remember the day 5 billion hamburgers served? Now there's 5 billion McDonald's. Okay. So he wants this ministry to feed them. The disciples are like, send them away. Sometimes in a board meeting, we're talking about some ministry, and the board members, Pastor, we just can't handle that. We're not prepared as a church. Let the people go to some other church, somewhere else. We can't handle it. Now, notice what Jesus says in verse 37, which is, wow. In verse 37, but when they say send them away, he then says, what does he tell the disciples to do in verse 37? You give them the food. You give them, like, wow, talk about being put on the spot. This reminded me of a story, true story. And it's funny because 40 years ago, I had been a youth pastor and assistant pastor, but 40 years ago, Robin and I planted our first church as a senior pastor south of Pittsburgh. And the church grew, and we bought land, and we were building the basement of the church. And only the block foundation, it was half done, so half the block was like up here and half was not done. Anyway, we ran out of money. And we needed like $30,000. For some reason, we needed it in 2 weeks. And then the bank loan would kick in. But we needed this $30,000 now. So I had 10 board members, including myself. And I got with the board and said, we need $30,000. And we're going to take up a special offering next week. And, of course, the board members were like, oh, man, we don't have it. That's a lot of money. Forget it, blah, 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 blah. And this is the only time in all of my 45 years of ministry, it's the only time that the Lord impressed on me to do this. So to the 22 board members of our present church, relax. So this is the only time. So there's 10 of us. We're all in our 20s and 30s, basically. That's because that's how old we all were. And the Lord laid on my heart, and I said to the board members, I know where we can get $30,000. And they're like, where? I said, the Lord impressed on me that each of us are going to give $3,000. There's 10 of us. That's going to be $30,000. Now, this was 40 years ago, so I was trying to calculate. I think in today's money, that would be like 10,000. So that'd be like me going to the board members today and going, you know what? Next Sunday, you guys are each going to give $10,000. So, I mean, they coughed, their eyes popped out of their head. I said, look, we can do it. So we had a church service in the basement of the unfinished church, Seeing the Sun, and we took up that offering. I have no idea, but that 30,000 came in. That was 40 years ago. I'm still friends with those other 9 board members. And I can tell you that 40 years later, God blessed those men from their 20s and 30s, and they sacrificially gave. Their businesses, their careers, their finances have been wonderfully blessed through all their years because they were like committed, crazy enough to give to the Lord, which was probably a lot, $10,000. So it was a lot.